My name is Samantha and Remoy.
My name is Remoy George Philip I.
And welcome to This Week in Masculinity. By the time you guys listen to this, more bullshit will have happened.
Some of those topics are R. Kelly. What about R. Kelly real quick?
R. Kelly has a sex cult.
No longer just pees on girls. He's got a sex cult.
A whole cult.
I never know how to say her name right, but Betsy DeVos?
Betsy DeVos?
I think it's only
fitting. It could be anything.
I think it's only fitting that the woman who doesn't know how to run our education system, who is running our education system, is the person who I don't know whose name to pronounce. So I think that's only fitting.
She probably doesn't know how to pronounce it either. You know, she's probably never been to school. She's probably had tutors literally her whole life. I don't understand how this is happening. Anyways.
Let's not snowball there. The OJ's been on the radar for like a year now. What's up with OJ?
So OJ got acquitted. Or no, he didn't get acquitted. He got freed. Right? After 9 years of good behavior, he was sentenced to 33 years for, robbery. We saw him on tape, but apparently that doesn't matter. He's walking free now. But the reason why we're actually here is because we're going to talk about Mr. Furman.
Mark Furman.
Mark Furman, right, who was actually responsible in the 80s for creating a group called MAW. We'll let you know a little bit what MAW stands for. So
use your imagination. What I'm excited to talk about, there's a great movie that came out recently. I don't know have you seen it, Sam, called The Big Sick?
I haven't. I almost saw it last night, but then I went and saw it.
It's a classic romantic comedy. It pulls at the heartstrings. You're wanting everybody to be happily ever after, but in the midst of it, you're like, is everybody going to be happily ever after?
No.
But it does deal with brown people like myself. And there's some interesting commentary that's come out after the movie's gotten so much acclaim that we shall talk about.
I'm excited about that because I haven't heard. I've only been seeing like ads like on Facebook about this movie, and I haven't read anything. So everything that I'm going to find out about it, you're going to tell me. So I'm excited.
Spoiler alert: Kumail Nanjiani is mad funny.
I'm sure that's the dude from
Silicon Valley,
right? Yeah.
He's more than funny, but the conversation afterwards is really important, really interesting to talk about.
I'm excited.
So, but first, I want to back up here a minute because I've been telling people that we're working on this podcast on masculinity, and I'm excited about it. But people tend to bite back and be like, yo, why on earth does the world need another thing dedicated to men? Which is fair.
Oh, I've heard that too.
But I want to, I think it's safe here to course correct and better explain what this podcast really hopes to do and hopes not to do. So I think one of the things is create a safe space for conversations about the negative issues surrounding masculinity and their byproducts. Operative term being negative.
And, the recipient of those negative things can be men. And I think that's one of the things that, for me, I'm very interested in seeing how, because I could tell you all the 35,000 ways that masculinity and toxic masculinity specifically have negatively impacted me as a woman, right? But, for me, I'm really trying to see, how fun has it been to, wear the mask? How fun has it been? Let me know.
Let's be real. It has its benefits, but then it also has its tragic downfall. So I think that's definitely a conversation space that this podcast hopes to encourage. What else?
Well, my whole shtick, right, is about how it's everybody's responsibility. You know what I'm saying? We're not over here trying to talk about masculinity and saying that this is a podcast solely for men. Definitely, we're hoping that a good amount of men are going to be listening to this, cis men, trans men alike. But here's the thing, though. When it comes to masculinity and when it comes to gender, it's everybody's problem. We've been dealing with a lot of stuff all together. And so this is really an opportunity to open up this side, basically, of, not necessarily open up, because I know that this has definitely been going on already, but just to broaden the dialogue about masculinity for everyone to chime in and say what they got to say. You know what I mean? So this is really an opportunity for us as humans to really get real and talk about, what the hell's going on.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, or maybe you did because you came up with it, but the way we spell masculinity is with a K.
That's right.
Signifying a mask.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's this idea there that men do wear masks. And everybody wears masks in their own ways, but masculinity or these kind of tropes or these conventions of what it means to be a man or masculine are masks that men whether they like it or not, have to wear every day and have to wear different ones within that kind of sub-mask or in that subfield when it comes to different situations, and how that actually may be more restricting or like in and of itself its own prison, and how maybe in this conversation we can, talk to the negative issues of those masks.
Yeah.
And then open people up to be maybe a little bit more free, even if it's just to have a conversation. So R. Kelly, a quick anecdote. I'm from Amarillo, Texas, and R. Kelly stopped in her hometown and made him a hero to a lot of us. But I think what we're about to talk about isn't very heroic. Take off your mask, R. Kelly.
Oh, my God. Okay, so let me read you a little quotey quote from Vox Media. This interview is with Jim DeRogatis, which I'm so sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, but he's essentially a reporter that has been following R. Kelly's fuckery for like 17 years, right? So let me give you a little quote. So he answers, yes, around Thanksgiving the following year in 2001, the 26-minute, 39-second videotape that prosecutors allege shows him having sex with a 14-year-old and urinating in her mouth came to me. The Chicago Sun-Times turned it over to the police. He was indicted for making child pornography, a really important distinction that so many of my sloppy fellow journalists do not get right. Is he was never tried for statutory rape for sex with minors. He was tried for making child pornography, which never made much sense to any of us. Why are you not also charging him with sex with a child?
Now, I mean, this is way in the past, but this kind of led into what's come into the news recently, like some sort of sex cult?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yep. And it sounds crazy, but so basically what happened was that back in the day, R. Kelly was like having sex with like young girls. So like there was this videotape, 14-year-old getting peed in her mouth by Mr. R. Kelly himself or whatever, right? Which like we should have been tipped off because it's not like he was hiding. He was putting that shit in his songs. Angel Number is Aaliyah's first album. She made it while she was married to him and she was 15. Then, there's a song called Bump and Grind. I believe you do know it. Show me some ID before I get me deep into you. That is definitely in the song. Unfortunately, I know, and I used to sing that. I used to love R. Kelly. Anyway, but the point is, so he went from having sex with minors to now like getting all those cases dismissed and then covering his tracks by now having people who are just over the age of 18. In this sex cult.
So it's not statutory rape, but he is kind of using his kind of, celebrity to bring people in, and is it strictly for him, or are there other men involved, do you know? Oh,
I'm so happy that you asked that question, because these girls are all in various houses, right, because he has a couple, and essentially when other men come into the house, they're asked to turn around and face the wall.
The women. Oh.
Yeah. Yep. Some of the story comes from R. Kelly's assistant who was living at the house with him and a bunch of women or whatever for a while. And basically she left and she's still been in contact with some of them. And yeah, she came out and said all this crazy shit about how, they're there. The way that he lures these girls in is by saying that they're going to have singing careers. Right. So parents let them go being like, oh, it's R. Kelly. He has such an amazing career. He's like such a great singer and all of that. And so they're willing to look past all the stuff that happened in the past with these young girls because he was essentially, he was never charged. Right. Like he was acquitted of all charges. So they're thinking like, oh, no, it's not a big deal. It's not as bad. Right. As it is. But it really actually is. And this girl comes on TV and she's like, no, I'm fine. I'm doing great. Like, what do you mean? Like, everybody needs to chill, basically, including my parents. Like, it's all good. And then when somebody asks her, so like, where are you located? Do you have any girls with you? She's like, I don't want to talk about that. It's fucking creepy.
That's real creepy. One issue with this that kind of I'm sensitive to is the fact that, especially if you're a male celebrity, especially if you're in like any sort of facet of the celebrity world, you have such an easy get out of jail card, especially if you're a man. Now, a woman can be tried for obviously this conversation is about women could be tried for wearing the wrong skirt or having a nip slip and be tried and harangued on every type of media. But a man can just easily be forgiven and get out of jail free. And it's almost a societal issue where men are so easily forgiven for being just men.
Right. Boys will be boys, right?
So then, I mean, where does that issue come from? What is kind of the root of that issue?
First, I mean, what I want to kind of like start by tackling is like, what has R. Kelly do this, right? So like, R. Kelly is a decorated, celebrated R&B singer and has been for a minute. You know, I was born and raised in France, okay? And I was listening to 12 Play just as much as everybody out here was listening to 12 Play. So I can say, you know, that his fame is international from the beginning. So it's like, you can go, you know, to France, you can go to Cape Town, you can go to Tokyo, you can go, you know, to Dubai and get you all kinds of gorgeous women. So I don't understand what has him be like, no, I need to have young girls, just like a harem of young girls in my house, you know, that I can just control. Like, what is up with you having them face the wall so that other men won't look at them? That's crazy.
I mean, that's kind of like the idea of not just objectification of women, but literally treating them like objects. And there's this understanding, it can be applied, especially in the case of like men and women. There's almost like this idea that women are subhuman. Like men are human and anything else, anything else. That runs along the whole gender spectrum. Yeah. Anything that is not man is subhuman. Woman, taken from the rib of man. That kind of religious ideology or that religious kind of idea is kind of disseminated so deep in the soil of society or civilization that it's almost understood as normal.
And I think that what it is that really gets me is like, you know, we're not doing him or any man out there any favors by letting them get away with that kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like, as somebody who is, you know, a contributing member of society, you know, there should be some kind of responsibility that's put on you. And I just don't get it.
Well, I think kind of a solution for everything that I think would be like an easy remedy would be education. But in our current state of the United States, and this is controversial for a lot of people, I understand that. And I'm not too well versed on all the issues within it, but again, how do you pronounce her name? Betsy
DeVos.
Betsy DeVos.
Whatever.
Met with men's rights activists to discuss rape on college campuses. Please fill me in on how this was.
So, I mean, it wasn't just men's rights, right? Apparently, she met with like a lot of different groups that are that deal with sexual violence in general, right? So she also met with people who, you know, specifically support survivors. Some of the groups that she met with, though, are kind of intense. Like, there's this group called the National Coalition for Men that basically went on and said, oh, actually, no, it's not them. It's the Stop Abusive and Violent Environments.
SAVE, as the acronym goes.
Mm-hmm. That basically has come out and said that domestic violence laws are an assault on civil rights. And they put together this whole legal document that is full-blown serious and really takes a look at various articles within the Constitution and within the Constitution and compares it to laws and explains in detail how that violates human rights.
So it kind of is saying that those spaces compromise men. If we try to make places more safe for women, it actually compromises men's freedom, or it compromises like civil rights by not creating an equal space for everybody.
Yes.
Fascinating.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, some of the stuff that's in there is like, you know, restraining orders, like, you know, why are there so many restraining orders, you know? And it's like, I think one of the things that for me is always like, because so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even though Betsy DeVos went and or DeVos or whatever the hell went and met up with all these different people that deal with sexual violence either on the side of the accuser or on the side of the survivor, she has come out and said that there aren't enough rights for the accuser, right? That the fact that people are being wrongfully accused of sexual assault and that's not something that is dealt with systematically is a problem. And this is not the first time that I've heard this. My only issue with that statement is that when people say that, they never, ever, ever mention that the false accusation of sexual assault, the false accusations of rape are on par with all other false accusations.
Explain.
What that means is, in terms of different crimes being committed, if you accuse somebody of stealing somebody, if you accuse somebody of robbing you, if you accuse somebody of selling drugs or whatever, people who are criminal cases, these cases have an 8% rate of false accusation. That is no different from sexual assault. My thing is, you've got organizations out there that are tackling the 92% of correct accusations. So I don't understand how you've got 3 or 4. I mean, and it gets ugly, actually, because one of the things that I was reading, right, is this National Coalition for Men actually went around for a while, shaking down women's networking events, key figures in this coalition. I forgot their names, but I'll find them for you and we'll put them on our website. Would go to these events and ask and pay their fee, right? And ask to go and they would be like, no, this is a women only event, thank you for your support. But this is really for women. And they would get sued. And they would win hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they would go around to various women's networking events and do that. And there's this UNRWA. It's called the UNRWA, UNRUH. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but it's a set of laws essentially that was implemented, and this coalition is based in San Diego, and so they would just go around and do that. And in California, they would be yeah, sure, you're right. And there's some judges who were are you joking? But they won a lot of cases, actually.
Okay, so just to play devil's advocate, I understand what you're saying, but falsely accusing someone of stealing a Coca-Cola from the bodega around the corner is different from telling someone or complaining that this man raped me or this man touched me without consent. So is that, there can be issue. There is right to kind of defend the not defend the false accusation, but deal with the false advocation or advocate against false accusation.
I see what you're saying. And I think it's important to identify that this is when we're talking about criminal cases, right? So when you're talking about armed robbery or something yeah. Obviously, if I accuse you of coming to my house and shooting shit up, that's a huge problem because you will go to jail for a very long time for doing something like that. Just like rape, except for Brock Turner. Still fuck him. But, I just think that to come out and start to stigmatize people who are actually victimized to such a degree that when we hear a statistic that says that 1 out of 5 women get raped, those are the reports. And that knowing that so many more women actually get sexually assaulted than the one in than 20% of a population, but the rest of the people don't feel don't feel comfortable coming forward because they know that somebody in the National Coalition for Men is gonna come out and be well, the rights of the accused, and it's okay, I got that, that's great. Nobody should be accusing somebody. Perjury is a real thing, and that represents 2 to 8%. So I'm just
I think the real thing is not the real thing, but the very thing is men have such social muscle, if not physical muscle. There's one thing, I can't even imagine being a woman 95% of the time, and human monsters who are a quarter bigger than you are trying to like just torpedo towards your vagina at all times, and how just intimidating or scary or just constantly you have to be protecting yourself. But not only that, men, like earlier discussed, have such social muscle. Like boys are easily forgiven, men are easily given the benefit of the doubt. Men are men, and women or anything else in the gender spectrum is subhuman. Mm-hmm. So it's a shame that it so easily becomes like false accusation. Women aren't given equal footing, and that's kind of where it becomes problematic because there's no equality. There's no even playing fields where women just don't have the same opportunity to be trusted or be taken seriously, or that this could even be such a large like space of retaliation. It's just bizarre to me. Well,
one of the things too that I definitely don't want to overlook, because I know that whoever is gonna say something about this, it's like, there are asshole women out there who do make false accusations just to piss people off. That happened to my uncle. Rest in peace. He passed away in prison because he was falsely accused of raping a young girl because somebody saw him at the store with my aunt. Which is, they're not real aunts because I'm Cameroonian. It's like a whole thing. But anyway, the point is they're friends of the family who were not together. They were just helping each other out. And somebody saw them and went and told this woman. And then she falsely accused my uncle of raping her daughter. And he died in jail. So like, I'm not ever going to say that it's okay to falsely accuse somebody. If you're being a dick, you're being a dick. It doesn't matter which side you're on. And I think that there should be consequences no matter what. The truth is, though, that when it comes to sexual assault, 92% of accusations are rightful accusations. And that's just a fact. So it's like,
So Mark Furman has a thing called MA, M-A-W. You've had time to think about it. You've had time to guess what MA stands for. Sam, why don't you tell him what MA stands for?
MA, M-A-W. Stands for Men Against Women.
Doesn't get more clear than that.
I literally, when I saw this, so there was as you guys know, OJ is free. And
he didn't do it.
Yeah, he didn't. He only wrote a book about how, let's not get into it. Okay.
Didn't do it.
I'm still just like, but how? But anyway, so, Mark Furman was a police officer in the LAPD that was involved in OJ's case. And people say that he is responsible for sinking the ship, right? And
he used the word.
If you watch this CNN series, right, it's this woman who's a journalist, right, who was composing this whole huge story and eventually ended up coming out with a book, which now that I know about it, I'm obviously going to read it. Her name is Laura Hart McKinney. She just decided to kind of, just follow the LAPD around and like kind of figure out what was going on, and then just realize that there was like a lot of sexism, a lot of racism going on. The saying goes that he started this group in the LAPD because women were starting to join the force where men would be outcast if they were courteous to women around them. And she was saying stuff like, when somebody would so much as like, if a man would so much as go and say hi to like, and like ask somebody how their weekend was, Mark Furman would walk right up to them and be like, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing? Don't talk to her. And then he would like walk away, like almost like a high school situation,
I mean, what confounds me is like, where does this disdain stem from? Or like, what is this hate? Where does it come from? Like, what? I mean, obviously that you can delve deep into the nurture situation of Mark Furman himself, but it's not just a Mark Furman thing. I mean, it's a universal men thing. I mean, it could go from woke feminism to the most extreme, which is what Mark Furman is, but it still saturates kind of the social landscape. Men treat women like they're subhuman majority of the time, whether we mean to or not. And I just, not only does it make me sad or make me kind of disappointed, I just can't understand how or where it exactly comes from.
Well, I think one thing that comes to mind, or at least what I've heard, is like there's like a notion that men are like losing grip of their power in society. And that is where a lot of the hate derives from. I mean, you know, I'm reading this book by Michael Kimmel right now, which I hope to God we have him on the podcast, called Guyland. So Michael Kimmel, for those of you who don't know, is the Men and Masculinities chair at Stony Brook University and has done extensive work on masculinity, has written like about masculinity through and through. Anyway, I'm reading Guyland, and there's like this passage where he mentions something about like going to like a bar somewhere in the Midwest and talking, like casually mentioning that there are a lot more women joining, like becoming firefighters, right? And like one of the guys are like,
how dare they?
Right. Like, bitches are taking over and da-da-da-da. And there's, like, a collective, like, sigh or, like, a here in the bar when he says that. And it's, like, this, like, lack of acceptance of human equality is absurd. And it's not helping these men who, I mean, I have a lot more to say about that. But in the interest of time, all I say is this. There are a lot of men who are in there from 44 to like 60 or something who are not rich enough to retire, but don't want to get jobs because they feel like the jobs that are available to them now are too womanly. So they're willing to be broke instead of going to work because there's a sense of masculinity that's not there.
My legitimate question is, like a person like Mark Furman or any kind of like man who aligns with this type of thinking, like, what do you tell your daughter or your nieces, or like when you're around your close friends who have daughters? Like, how do you interact? I don't even understand how you can exist in this world and have any sort of close relationships with anyone with this kind of line of thinking that is so, where you demonize the other gender or anybody else on the gender spectrum. Like, if there's, I don't know. It just blows my mind.
I just want us all to get along, Remoy. I just want us all to get along.
Speaking of getting along, there's a great movie that came out recently that Sam hasn't seen called The Big Sick. Would you like to know what it's about?
Please tell me.
I won't include too many spoilers, but it's based, so the movie stars Kumail Nanjiani, who is in Silicon Valley, who's a brown person comedian who's very funny with a very dry sense of humor, and it's palpable. It's lovely. And the movie is actually based on his a true life story between him and his wife, who is white, meaning of a white complexion, Caucasian, and the story of how their interracial relationship came to be. It's charming. It's sad. It's very real in the sense that for anybody who's been, whether brown, white, black, white, yellow, red, green, whatever, anybody who's been in an interracial relationship with two very different family backgrounds, it's very sensitive to that, and it's very comfortable in that, and it makes you feel less alone when seeing it. So me, being a brown guy who is in an interracial relationship and who has been in many, and who has had a very traditional family at times, and who their traditions have demanded things from me that I didn't agree with or my current life didn't agree with, this movie was refreshing. Oh, my God, I was laughing, awesome. I was clapping, I was smiling ear to ear because I was like, this movie gets me. Aww. There's a brown man who can love whoever he wants, and his family can't tell him otherwise, or his society can't tell him otherwise. And I feel there's been a lot of that response going around, whether it's on the internet or in just social circles everywhere, like brown men who have been in an interracial relationship can appreciate this movie and feel more empowered. And then there's other stuff that's out there that's kind of similar, like Aziz Ansari's, what's it called? Master of None.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of celebration of interracial dating and so on and so forth. Hassan Minhaj, who's a correspondent on The Daily Show, has a one-man show that was made into a Netflix special called Homecoming King that kind of covers a lot of that.
I love him so much.
Shout out to my boy. And with all these things coming out, there's been a lot of response and necessary response that initially I wasn't comfortable with, but it's coming from brown women or South Asian women specifically. wondering or demanding why white women are set as kind of the pinnacle of the romantic hierarchy, and brown women are used to either be the caricature or just the stepping stones to get to that top that is white. And initially when I read it, I got real defensive. I was like, that's wrong, or that argument is faulty, and here's why. And I realized that discomfort, that immediate discomfort, meant that there was actually something valid in that argument. So I sat down with the editor or the writer of one of those think pieces, who got a lot of internet play. And it's coming out on Rover in a couple weeks, rover.whoistheo.com. And we talked more about that. And I guess my question is have you been aware of this conversation, whether it's in the brown community or the black community, where white women are kind of fetishized towards the top of the kind of romantic hierarchy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that specifically with, like, the black community, and I wouldn't even just say the black community, the black American community, but I would say, the African community as well, or, like, Caribbean or whatever. Well, maybe not Caribbean. I don't really know that much about that history, so I'm not going to talk shit. But, like, people, I mean, Emmett Till was, brutally murdered for supposedly whistling at a white woman. To this day, we don't even know if he did that. So, there's definitely, like, that history there that I think it's so loaded, I think specifically because black women in this country are part of that history as well, where they had to see that and had to mourn people who were in their lives that were killed because of that situation. I think specifically it's kind of like a sore spot. And for me, really what comes up is, I think you should be able to be with whoever the fuck you want to be with. I myself have dated, like men from different ethnicities, and I've been happy to be able to do that, right? And nobody has ever been... Oh, actually, no, I did have somebody, when I came out of the train once, be like, oh, you're so beautiful. And I was like, oh, thanks. And he was like, please don't marry no white man. Please, please. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Anyway, so like... I get both points, but the problem is internalized racism. Yeah. That's really the issue.
Well, that's the issue, and what's interesting, or what is important to understand here, is this wasn't necessarily just making an argument against white women. It was about, brown men, check yourself about what's going inside you, and the fact that, I guess a lot of issues I have with society in general is that there's not equal representation when it comes to media or whatever, for the most part. Until recently, we were only hearing one kind of monolithic American culture, which was predominantly white, heterosexual, and so on and so forth. But now that we're getting more representation, it felt like, oh, everything's better. Like, there's brown people on TV, but really it's brown men being successful at being whatever a brown man needs to be at this point, and stepping all over brown women, at least to a certain degree, and that's how it's being interpreted. And that's disappointing because again, it's kind of men getting the pass, men getting at least the first step or the upper hand in saying brown masculinity is human. Brown femininity or brown females, you're still a little subhuman.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, when it comes to brown women, right, it's like brown women, I will include black in that, just like women of color. What happens is there's an intersection, right, of sexism and racism. And it's like, I think one of the things that happens specifically when we see, men of color dating white women and, like, not addressing kind of, and, like, talking about racism but never talking about racism, is that we always feel forgotten.
And I think that's fair. Like, when I was talking to Nadia, the writer of the article, she had an eloquent statement that hits it right on the head, in the sense that sexism and racism are two sides of the same coin for her. When she deals with sexism, she's also dealing with racism. When she deals with racism, there's absolutely an amount of sexism involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that points to, and to what you said, is that brown men who are making this television, who are getting to tell their stories, are forgetting, consciously or unconsciously, the brown women, and making them the stepping stool for their success or their love interests or their rom-coms being white women.
I mean, I feel like that's, and I mean, we can argue, right, that that's kind of exactly what, you know, problematic white, like, ancestors have done, right, is like built everything they've built on the backs of brown folks. And then you've got, you know, like men of color, like, I mean, and some of them, like, you know, I think of people who, like, for example, Jesse Williams, who is getting a lot of shit for dating Minka Kelly, which, I mean, whatever, you know, I think like what's for me, what comes up with stuff like that is like, you should be able to date whoever you want, but there are certain things that you can't admit for the conversation because you have said things in the past that lead us to question whether all of that was true. And like, we get it. Like, I mean, well, maybe not we get it. I get it. You know, I love Jesse Williams still. I still believe in his speech. I still everything. I still stand for whatever he's saying. But I just think that like, once you put that kind of shit out there, you have a responsibility to address what's what's already kind of like swimming around, you know? You can't just leave it there.
I mean, we have to keep it real here. Like, we have to have this conversation has to be constructive. We have to acknowledge there's intersectionality here. And then there's like history, and then there's like the immediate experience, right? So if I'm honest, like, I can relate to both sides. Like, I can relate to the championing of the white woman, quote unquote, to the top, because I felt that at times. And maybe that's due in part to the fact that I didn't really connect with my kind of ethnic background. But there is also this idea, if I'm to be completely honest, like lingering in the back of my head, that kind of the brown aspects or the brown women as objects are kind of boring. And it hasn't been presented in my mind as the ultimate enticement for me, while on the contrary, white women are. And as these stories come out in the zeitgeist, in like media and television, movies, on our Netflix, as we Netflix and chill, it only propagates, it only pushes that kind of idea forward, and it doesn't give a voice to maybe the brown women who feel, again, marginalized, disenfranchised, ostracized, and a stepping stool.
Well, I think like one thing that kind of what I'm hearing, what you're saying is like, you know, if women aren't seen as people, then brown women or women of color are seen as a subversion of even that. And I think that there's
something to that.
Yeah. And I think that that's the thing that, you know, for me, I'm just like, I have a really hard time because, you know, I have two nieces that like I adore, right? And like as they grow up, I'm seeing various things that just come in the space that are happening for them that are not happening for their younger brothers, you know? And I'm like, fuck, like, it's just like, what am I supposed to tell you? Like, how do I address that specifically without it being like, you know, something that scars you or something that you have to defend yourself against, even though you haven't fully experienced it yet. I mean, it's just like, it's tough. And I think like, that's where it becomes everybody's responsibility, right? Because I mean, as women of color and, you know, white women as well, we can stand on pedestal, on our soapboxes and be like, listen, you know, this is something that needs to be recognized. This is something that needs to be recognized. This is something that needs to be recognized. And that's great, but that's still us defending ourselves rather than it becoming like a human issue to tackle.
And I think, like, if you're going to look for a solution, like, how do you propose a solution, Remoy? I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but we need to kind of, and I think it's slowly happening, maybe not to the extent of all colors are getting this opportunity, but men, instead of just sharing men's stories or writing men's stories where women serve the men or are only a stepping stool for the men to accomplish so and whatever, like, men need to kind of take an L for a while and find a way to promote women's stories, create a better platform, open up the platform, have these conversations, allow for women to shine and let their stories tell. And it sounds stupid, like, why should men be the gatekeeper? Because we are. We've had the privilege and the position. Like we've already established, like, men have the get out of jail free card, but they also have the ability to have their story be told and be appreciated as normal, as human. Mm-hmm. And in that kind of position, I think it's only up to men. It's not only, but it's absolutely up to men to know what stories to tell and to allow what stories to get to be a part of the conversation. I think
it's up to men, but I think it's really up to being able to have a partnered conversation. I think that, we can kind of respectively on our sides or along, the various categories that are on the gender spectrum kind of say what we have to say. But it has to be a collective effort where we have to actually hear each other. Because, what I'm thinking about and kind of the point of the podcast is as the actor in perpetuating some of these things, right? There's got to be an impact on you as a dude if there's internalized racism, and you know that you have your sister or your woman cousin who's dealing with some bullshit, and maybe you don't know, but maybe there's something there and you don't really know how to speak to that. But you just let it go because you don't know how to speak to it. And then she's just dealing with what she's dealing with. But on your side, that there's something that you wish you could do to have her be okay, And I think that that's something that, because there are so many, there's always positional, right? There's always okay, there's the men and the women, and then we're going to come together on some things, but then we're going to go back to defending our points of view. And it's this partisanship, which ironically sounds very likely, like what we're dealing with in government and all of that, but is completely unhelpful.
Yeah, it's not, it only serves us better to be in conflict with one another not, exactly. Divide and conquer, right? It's only it only serves to divide us more.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
So whether, we're seeing whether it's rom-coms or R. Kelly or gubernatorial leaders of education, it's important to see how masculinity and all its issues and its flaws intersects with us on the daily.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to see how, for me, it's always going to be about the mask, right? It's important to see how the people wearing that mask or performing that persona or whatever, adhering to those standards, the impact that it has on them and their ability to fully express themselves and to be there for the people that they love.
Yo, take off the mask, bruh. Take off the mask, bruh.
Oh, God.
So in the next few episodes, we hope to cover masculinity more and kind of help identify the mask and help maybe create a comfortable space to maybe talk about what it looks like to take it off, right? In the next few episodes, we're going to talk about relational violence, both, the perpetrator and the victim. I think the victim being a very operative point to make topic. We're hopefully going to talk about kind of the hood dude and the hood persona and the hood guy. It's going to be a tough one, but an interesting one. And we're talking about so much more. So we're excited to have you listening. Thank you so much for tuning in.
And again, just want to point out that this is not about men. This is about masculinity and the persona of masculinity. So thank you for listening. This has been Masculinity. I'm Samantha.
Boy, George Phillips first.
And we'll see you next time. We're out.